stories of violence that became the driving force for the movement.
Reverend Shuttlesworth was being bombed, he was being jailed, he was being beaten. He himself said he was willing to give his life for the cause of segregation.
Overlooked pioneers in the fight for civil rights.
History had me glued to the seat.
Discovering things from a painful past.
The Clotilda story has every bit of racism and injustice that ever happened to African Americans in this country.
And the dividing lines of race in communities.
If you purchase property on the west side of Center Street, you were subject to being attacked.
WVTM 13 Chronicle presents Alabama's Black History.
I'm Guy Rawlins.
I'm Eunice Elliott.
And I'm Lisa Crane. We are here in the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. This cultural and educational research center promotes the significance of civil rights developments here in Birmingham and all across the state. Throughout the galleries, there are exhibits highlighting a painful history, but also courageous moments for African Americans and the mission to gain equality.
One of the best-known civil rights protests in Alabama history, the Montgomery bus boycotts.
4 days before that boycott began, Rosa Parks was arrested and fined for refusing to give a purse seat to a white male passenger on the bus. But before Rosa Parks, there was Claudette Colvin.
Claudette Colvin can still remember what she was wearing on March 2nd, 1955.
I had a light blue sweater and a dark blue skirt. I never will forget that dark blue skirt. A light blue sweater and a dark blue skirt.
More importantly, that is the day she was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a city bus to a white passenger. She was only 15 years old.
One of the white passengers said, "Oh, you better get up, because you know it's the law." And when I didn't get up, one of the girls in the back of me said, "Well, she ain't got to do nothing but stay black and die." Oh Lord, I get so wound up in this, trying to relate back to this.
Although Claudette had not planned on showing this particular act of defiance to the segregation laws that day, she was very aware of the many unfair practices towards black people.
I said, history had me glued to the seat. I said, it felt as though Harriet Tubman hand was pushing me down on one shoulder, and Sojourner Truth hand was pushing me down on another.
Another name we think of in regards to the civil rights struggle is Rosa Parks. Ms. Parks was arrested 9 months after Colvin, but the Montgomery Improvement Association felt Rosa Parks was a better face for the movement.
Because the MIA wanted to use her. They wanted to use her, and they didn't want to use a teenager, because who was going to follow a teenager? By Dr. King being the spokesperson for the movement, he had held the people together so long, they didn't want to lose. So they were, in other words, they were running out of time. So they wanted to use Rosa to draw the people in, the adult people in. And so and by Rosa being a seamstress and worked at Montgomery Fair, she was in the homes of a lot of these affluent white people as doing alterations. And so she was well known in the white circles too, and she would be more accepted than a teenager.
So Colvin is often forgotten in the movement.
Oh, sure, I was forgotten the day I went back to school. The day I went back to school, my peers, they all said, "Claudette, you are crazy."
Over time, she became one of the 4 plaintiffs in the bus desegregation case that went to the Supreme Court, not Rosa Parks.
They don't know Mary Louise Smith Ware, they don't know Susan McDonald, and they don't know Aurelia Browder. A lot of people think because they see Rosa sitting on the bus, and they thought the case, just because she got up and refused, that's what ended segregation. No, it was a lot of litigation that went on, took place. It's a lot, and a lot of attorneys.
Ms. Colvin says regardless of her actions that March day, she knew she would be part of the fight for change.
But if I didn't have sit in that seat, I would have been involved in some way. I would have been involved in some way, because the movement was with the children. The movement was the children, the young generation.
As a young person with few black heroes written in her own history books, Ms. Colvin has been written about in books, documentaries, television, and film, and has even been recognized by Congress, all which she takes great pride in.
Well, wonderful that somebody's still thinking about, the struggle.
On June 5, 1956, a Montgomery federal court ruled that any law requiring segregated seating on buses violated the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. In Montgomery, a statue of Rosa Parks now stands near Montgomery Plaza, just feet away from where Parks boarded that now famous bus. It was unveiled on December 1st, the 64th anniversary of her 1955 arrest.
Hitting business bottom line. That was the push during a campaign in Birmingham in the early 1960s.
Ian Wright spoke to the daughter of a man who led that effort about how things played out.
Images like these from the Magic City were seen nationwide in the early 1960s. But what many may not have seen or heard much about is a powerful movement in Birmingham in 1962.
The selective buying campaign has been identified by many as the defining factor that allowed Dr. King to come to Birmingham and have the successful demonstrations that took place in 1963.
Donna Dukes knows the ins and outs of that movement.
My dad, Frank Dukes, developed the selective buying campaign.
At the time, Frank Dukes was the SGA president at Miles College. He and other students put together flyers to spread the word about their campaign. Donna says similar campaigns had been tried before, but were unsuccessful.
In Birmingham during that time, it was illegal to have a boycott. So my dad decided to call the campaign a selective buying campaign, meaning we're just going to be selective about where we shop. Therefore, they were not breaking the law.
With the selective buying campaign, they wanted to affect that bottom line.
Charles Woods III runs the education program at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. He says the campaign aimed to get the stores to desegregate, and organizers also wanted to see black clerks and attendants working where they shopped.
African Americans contributed to about 25% of their bottom line for those stores. And so they recognize that if they totally stop supporting those businesses, a lot of those businesses might actually go out of business.
The campaign lasted into 1963, and Charles said it continued despite efforts to stop it.
The way the city responded was by saying that they were going to cut off food to 70,000 poor black families.
But the students from Miles and their partners didn't let up. And Donna says they were eventually able to desegregate 2 department stores.
The success of the campaign really depended upon the fact that my father's campaign welcomed the involvement of women, welcomed the involvement of whites. You did not have to be a minister to be a part of this campaign. And so when you have that type of diversity and inclusivity, you have success.
With the gift of a camera from her mom, Donna shares more of the history in a documentary she produced. It's called Stand, Untold Stories from the Civil Rights Movement.
Most of the downtown stores, the majority of the trade was from black folk.
I'm very blessed in that both of my parents were quite open with me about the true nature of the Birmingham Civil Rights Movement, that it was not this movement where there were blacks on one side and whites on the other side and never the twain would meet. There was this huge divide. They explained that there were whites who were very involved in the movement and very supportive of the movement.
The film premiered at Miles College, and when her dad saw it, he loved it. And Donna loves sharing this part of Birmingham's history with others.
I considered it an honor to be able to shed light on an aspect of the civil rights movement that most people did not realize existed. I love the fact that the civil rights movement had the selective buying campaign of 1962, otherwise it just might not have had 1963.
Ian Wright, WVTM 13 News.
Every year at this time, we take a look back at the people like Frank Dukes who have really changed the politics and culture in Alabama and our city.
Yeah, Martin Luther King Jr., Fred Shuttlesworth, Ralph Abernathy, and Representative John Lewis.
But still, there are so many names that often go overlooked, including the story of a young woman from right here in Birmingham.
Rarely do we say her name.
A young girl by the name of Benita Carter.
Benita Carter. Benita Patrice Carter.
But who is Benita Carter?
Well, in 1979, a young girl by the name of Benita Carter was tragically murdered by police officer George Sands in an altercation that occurred inside the store, and she was just an innocent bystander.
That incident led to more than just an outcry in the community for police reform, as Birmingham police officer George Sands had been involved in several other incidents where excessive force had been alleged.
Unfortunately, the mayor at the time, David Vann, did not take action against George Sands. He did not fire him, and he there were no charges held against him.
An innocent young woman killed just blocks from the home she shared with her parents. The community's outrage swelled, and a Birmingham City Councilman known for pushing for police reform was pushed to the forefront of the fight.
Well, the Bonita Carter incident sort of changed my life and the direction of my life.
Bonita's death would forever change politics in Birmingham, largely influencing Dr. Richard Arrington to run for mayor and ultimately become elected as the first black mayor of the city of Birmingham, Alabama.
Dr. Arrington's role as mayor has been told, but there's little known information about the young woman whose death sparked this historical moment and who she was to her family and her friends.
We sung in the choir together. She's actually, her birthday is 6 days after mine. We were January babies, so January 20th and January 26th. We always talk about the January babies. Never met a stranger, friendly person. It was just devastation for the entire community.
That community now bears a marker to recognize Bonita Carter, her life and her death.
All of them, black, white, all will know the Bonita Carter story and how that tragic incident here in Birmingham led the Birmingham community, black and white, to decide that we must change this community. We must become a better place.
40 years later, we still mourn Bonita's death. It's a reminder that the evils of racism can bear fatal consequences. Bonita Patrice Carter, say her name. The reason it's important to say her name is because she is one of us. And 40 years later, she will forever be a part of us.
Lisa, I really enjoyed doing that feature on Bonita Carter because that's one of those names you don't hear a lot in Birmingham Black history.
Yeah, and that's what this program is all about. We really want to shine a light on those often forgotten people who played such an important role in the movement. Coming up, an in-depth look at the catalyst of the civil rights fight here in Birmingham. The story behind Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth's push for equality for African Americans despite the violence and doubt he was up against. Plus, preserving the stories behind the African American vote. We'll take you inside the National Voting Rights Museum in Selma, where work is underway to share that important piece of history with future generations.
As we head to break, we remember a civil rights pioneer who left his mark on the world, and now a place here in the city is memorialized in his honor. These bars are from the jail cell that held Dr. King here in Birmingham. And now the cell itself honors Dr. King. It's located on the 7th floor inside the county courthouse. He wrote his letter from Birmingham jail in 1963, but in October 1967, the civil rights leader was arrested and sent to both the Bessemer and Birmingham Jefferson County jails. That was just 5 months before his assassination. His name is all across Birmingham. There's a street named after him. The airport honors him as well. But it was at Bethel Baptist Church where Fred Shuttlesworth first started his fight for civil rights. His determination for equality for his people encouraged others to get on board.
Reverend Shuttlesworth was being bombed, he was being jailed, he was being beaten, he was being arrested, he was being harassed. You name it, for the most part, he went through it.
Pastor Thomas Wilder is the pastor at Bethel Baptist Church, the same church Reverend Shuttlesworth pastored from 1953 to 1961.
Prayed about it. This is where I felt that God wanted me to be, and so I came here.
Wilder admits he initially didn't know about Shuttlesworth's legacy, but soon learned.
I met Reverend Shuttlesworth, began to talk with him, began to research him, and then thought, wow, what have I stepped into?
Pastor Wilder points out that not only did the first steps in the civil rights fight begin in Collegeville's Bethel Baptist Church, but Reverend Shuttlesworth was the catalyst for the movement across the city.
Reverend Shuttlesworth's home was bombed the first time in 1956. And then again in 58, and then again in 62.
A police officer approached Shuttlesworth after one of the bombings.
He said, Reverend, if I were you, I'd get out of town fast as I could. I said, Officer, you're not me. You go back and tell your clan brethren that if God could keep me through this, then I'm here for the duration.
He was nonviolent, but he was confrontational, and most people don't understand how you can be both. You know, he would get up in your face, he would call things as he saw them. And there were things that he saw that were definitely wrong, and he was not afraid to confront segregation on all fronts.
From busing
So we rode the buses, and over 250 people got arrested, I guess, enjoying desegregated riding.
To education.
His wife, during the confrontation at Phillips High School, was stabbed in the hip from somebody who was fighting him. He had been hit with brass knuckles.
To employment and voting. It seemed all aspects of life in the South were separate and unequal.
It was a cultural segregation, but there was also a legal segregation. That there were laws on the books that said that black people and white people could not play together.
Eventually, Shuttlesworth invited Dr. King to the field, though King was slow in coming.
He had invited him and invited him and invited him. Andrew Young also states the same thing, that it took 3 years to get him to come. But Reverend Shuttlesworth convinced him that to come in 1963 and said to him, if you can succeed in Birmingham, you can succeed anywhere. Because Birmingham at that time had the reputation as the most segregated city in America.
All this originated out of Bethel Baptist Church because Reverend Shuttlesworth thought not only was it God's will for him, but it was morally and spiritually the right thing to do.
What happened here really did make a change across the world. Nelson Mandela even talks about what happened in Birmingham, Tiananmen Square. You know, they were singing "We Shall Overcome." And all of that came from this small building and from one man named Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth.
Pastor Wilder also told me that not everybody was on board with Shuttlesworth movement. In fact, some folks thought his bravery bordered insanity. But he felt the only way to take on this evil was face to face.
Images like this were all too common as African Americans tried to register to vote, sheriffs blocking the courthouse doors. As you get ready to vote this year, we're taking a look at the crucial role Alabama played in making the Voting Rights Act of 1965 a reality. Ian Wrights traveled to Selma to look at how events in our state led to change in our nation and how that history is being preserved.
I turned 12 4 days after the Selma Montgomery March.
Sam Walker lived some of the history on display at the National Voting Rights Museum and Institute in Selma.
At 11 years old, I got locked in one of these cells 2 times.
You did?
Marching for the right to vote, yes.
Decades later, he returned home to ensure that history was preserved. Today, he's the museum's historian.
I've been doing it since they opened the doors back in March of 1993.
When Sam showed me around, he was quick to point out the stories of foot soldiers.
Everybody's seen those pictures, those videotapes of Dr. King leading all those civil rights marches. But then you see all these people walking it back at Dr. King in those marches. Well, those are the people we call the foot soldiers.
Men and women, young and old, who marched for voting rights during Bloody Sunday on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, or the 5-day march from Selma to Montgomery.
Now, when you walk through the museum, you'll see footprints.
Those footprints are from the foot soldiers who have shared and recorded their stories at the museum, some 3,000 of them to date. The steps they took in history, now on display, next to black and white pictures that capture the violence marchers faced in the 1960s. Those very images were shared around the globe at the time and helped turn the struggle for voting rights in Alabama into a nationwide issue.
Nobody thought about, trying to make history when they was doing it. They just wanted to be treated better.
While the 15th Amendment guaranteed African Americans the right to vote, exercising that right was not easy in some southern states like Alabama.
In 1901, they instituted Jim Crow laws and black codes into that Constitution, mainly to keep African Americans from exercising their rights to vote. So things like the grandfather clause, which was a clause that said if your grandfather was a slave and could not vote, then you cannot vote, was instituted into that Constitution, as well as literacy tests and poll taxes.
Charles Woods III is the education program manager at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. He says when African Americans began to exercise their right to protest with the Montgomery bus boycott in the 1950s, the civil rights movement really started to take shape. And along the way, our state was ground zero.
Montgomery was where the southern states seceded from the Union to create the Confederacy. And it's also that same place where Martin Luther King stood on those steps to give a fiery speech about why voting rights is important.
Today you'll spot a few campaign signs right across from the museum, a sign that an election is just around the corner. Inside, there are signs everywhere reminding us that the right to vote for African Americans in that election didn't come easy. And that fight should never be forgotten.
This is just right outside that window.
That's why 27 years after he first walked these halls, Sam is here day after day, sharing that history and inspiring others to go out and make their own.
I want them to be able to see themselves in some of these pictures and some of these statements, because these were ordinary, regular people. These were not elite people. These were not, nothing special. They just wanted to do what they could to make their situation better. Every individual can do what they can to make a difference.
Ian Wright, WVTM 13 News.
This year marks 150 years since the 15th Amendment was added and 55 years since President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act.
The 16th Street Baptist Church will be opening the doors to its new state-of-the-art museum this fall. Here's what the museum will look like once it's complete. The church is using Unity Smart City kiosk technology made by local tech company Juke. The museum will showcase the history of the church dating back to 1873, focusing on the major impact the church played during the Civil Rights Movement. 16th Street Baptist Church boasts more than 100,000 visitors every year. Still to come, a street divided, a neighborhood bombed so many times it became known as Dynamite Hill. But out of the ashes rose people who would not back down. And a place born out of a love for music, how one man used just his guitar and a small shack to bring people of all races together.
Historically black colleges and universities are seeing a big boost in funding thanks to a recent spending bill. Senator Doug Jones advocated for the bill mandating permanent funding. And as we head to break, we recognize a historic donation at Miles College. Former Auburn basketball and NBA star Charles Barkley gifted the college $1 million. It's the largest single donation in the school's 122-year history. Barkley visited the college back in September. That money will go to scholarships and launching the school's $100 million comprehensive campaign.
Birmingham Center Street was a battleground during the Civil Rights Movement. It became a central meeting spot for some of the most prominent names in civil rights history. Homes were bombed, riots broke out. Sarah Killian shares the journey of one man who grew up on Center Street.
Center Street was the dividing line, the real estate dividing line between blacks and whites.
Jeff Drew has spent all his life on Center Street. He remembers a time this area was known as Dynamite Hill, and he knows all too well how that nickname started.
The first bombing took place at Arthur Shore's house. Many of us went. It happened at night, and we went down to see the damage. It was a horrific experience, and that's the moment in my life, I guess I was about 9 years old, 9 or 10, that really polarized me and made me understand what bigotry and hatred was.
His parents, John and Deanie Drew, were key figures in the civil rights movement. The Drews were instrumental in helping African Americans register to vote in Birmingham and were personally invited by Dr. Martin Luther King to get involved in the Montgomery bus boycott.
And that helped to solidify the Montgomery bus boycott. During that meeting, Uncle Mike asked Dad if when he was in Birmingham, could he come and visit with us? Mom and Dad said, sure.
Dr. Martin Luther King didn't just visit with the Drews. Their home here on Center Street became the meeting spot for what was known as the Central Committee.
Fred Shuttlesworth, as we all know, Fireball Fred. Fred was fairly radical. He was a fighter, and Martin was more moderate and more conservative. And so we had those two strong views that had to be melted together, and that melting occurred right here where we sit.
As a child, Drew saw it all. For him, one moment in particular stands out.
The Central Committee was meeting and the phone rang from the White House. His side of the conversation was, hello, Mr. President, hello, Mr. Attorney General. No, sir, we're not going to stop the demonstrations. No, we're not going to stop the sit-ins. I'm sorry that you are embarrassed about what is going on in Birmingham, Alabama, but we want the whole world to know that you support Bull Connor, and you support Alabama, and you support segregation, and you support the violence that's going on here in Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm sorry, but we're not going to stop. And bam, hung the telephone up on the President of the United States. I was in awe.
These meetings solidified a friendship and love between the Drews and Dr. King. And for Jeff Drew, that's why King's death is still so painful.
It was a low moment. My mom and dad were invited to the funeral when he was assassinated. They went to the funeral. I didn't go. And I think I saw one picture with my dad's hand on the caisson. It was the lowest point of my parents' life.
Highs and lows growing up on Center Street. Drew feels like it's important to talk about it all.
So I'm going to speak out about it, I'm going to write about it, and I'm going to try to help as many people as I can to live together in harmony.
Living together in harmony, the ultimate goal of the civil rights movement. In Birmingham, Sarah Killian, WVTM 13.
Another meeting place that became a staple in the African American community, the barber shop. You can get a clean shave, and it created opportunities for blacks to generate their own income. One of the most important barbers in the civil rights movement's name was James Armstrong. He was known as the Barber of Birmingham. He actually cut Dr. Martin Luther King's hair in this actual chair.
We lost quite a man in 2019. Henry Gibson, known by most as Gip, passed away at the age of 99. Till almost the very end, though, he was still playing the blues in his backyard juke joint, and people came from all over the world to hear him. Gip's Place and Gip himself played an important role in Alabama's black history, and his family hopes to continue his legacy of bringing people together through the love of music.
This man's a living legend.
Henry Gibson was a blues legend. What started as jam sessions at his Bessemer home in the early 1950s grew into an all-out juke joint, still popular today, almost 70 years later.
And everybody met him, he made them feel like they were family. So if he saw you, he'll call you his daughter. He makes you feel like you just at home when you come here.
It's one of the last standing juke joints in the country where you can still find good company and great live music.
Mr. Henry Gibson was the blues. His life was the blues. You look at Mr. Henry Gibson, those brothers were cut from something different.
But Jock Webb has earned major respect in the blues music scene himself. He's following in the footsteps of those like Gip who came before him.
One thing I like about Mr. Gibb, he's going to open up with a prayer. His place was more church and spiritual than anything.
Informal establishments like Gip's Place were, and he argues still are, an important part of African American culture in the South.
We weren't allowed to congregate in such a way and to do anything that had to do with our culture. We found ways of worshiping, we found ways of cleansing, we found ways of giving thanks to the Spirit. We found the belief that someday we would see the other side of the road, so to speak.
As times have changed, so have the blues, reaching beyond the African American community where it started and being embraced by people of every color.
It doesn't matter what color a person is, that spirit exists in all of us.
It's music that breaks barriers and forms bonds.
That's my motto of my father when he was living. No black, no white, no colors. Let's bring everybody together.
Jefferson County Schools made history this year by unanimously electing Dr. Walter Gonsolin Jr. as its first black superintendent. He serves 56 schools in the largest district in the state. Dr. Gonsolin is no stranger to the needs of the district as he served as deputy superintendent for 2.5 years. Coming up, the beginning of a new era, changing the face of politics in Birmingham forever. Dr. Richard Arrington Jr. details his move from college professor to leader of a city divided by race.
I know where we are, I know where we've come from, and I know where we still need to go as a city.
That quote echoed across Birmingham as Dr. Richard Arrington Jr. was sworn in as the city's first black mayor 40 years ago.
And we're hearing about his journey into politics in his own words.
Of Mary Arrington's 40th anniversary of being elected the city of Birmingham's first African-American mayor. Can we get a round of applause for that?
I did not grow up in Birmingham dreaming about becoming mayor. There were no black role models. There were no black mayors when I grew up. Had I said I think I might want to be a mayor one day, they might have wanted to put me in a straitjacket. That's because there were none. There were no black mayors. But I got that opportunity. Good things happened.
Those good things lasted for 20 years with Dr. Richard Arrington leading the city of Birmingham as mayor. But getting into politics wasn't an easy decision. Dr. Arrington's political career started when a group of students at Miles College challenged him to run for city council in the early 1970s. He was reluctant and sent them away.
Come back tomorrow, let me think about it. I didn't think they were coming back. Sure enough, the next day, there they were right back in the office. That's a short version of why I was too embarrassed to say no. They helped me get elected to the city council. That is where it started. And how do you get to be mayor? I never wanted to be mayor. I had been on the council about 7 years. I was thinking about serving my second term, thinking about leaving when the Bonita Carter incident occurred.
June 22, 1979, a young black woman, Bonita Carter, was killed by a white policeman.
I walked into that meeting down at that church, and much to my surprise, there were about 50 or 60 black ministers sitting there that morning. And they were upset because the city had not dismissed the police officer who killed Bonita Carter. And they said to me, "We want you to run for mayor." And it caught me by surprise.
But everyone wasn't supportive of the idea of Arrington running for mayor.
A.G. Gaston, and he's sitting there with a man named Vincent Townsend. Now, some of these folk know Vincent Townsend. He was a power broker for the white community of Birmingham, worked for the Birmingham News. And both of them were very nice to me. But they said, "Richard, you know, it's not time for you to run. You know, it's not time for a black mayor." Well, I knew I couldn't back down. I had already announced it.
And on election night, history was made, and the next day, Dr. Arrington got a very special phone call.
It was Dr. Gaston. He called me. My father said, "Richard, boy, I congratulate you." Said, "I didn't think the white folk would let a Negro become mayor." I'm just trying to show you how people rallied behind him, even people who didn't think the time was right, helped to make it right, and how they rallied behind you.
It was a community coming together to put Mayor Arrington on their shoulders, changing the political climate in Birmingham in 1979 and for many years to come.
In the city that I was able to serve, that you would still remember what we did, and we would still say to one another, thanks, and we would still understand that we still have work to do.
Like Arrington, across the state, there are still many firsts for African Americans in politics. Just last year, Talladega elected its first black mayor. Timothy Ragland won the race against incumbent mayor Jerry Cooper back in October, and Ragland making double history as the city's youngest mayor. He says he wants to improve the city's infrastructure and education system and build up more job opportunities. And a double dose of history as Montgomery also elected its first African-American mayor. Stephen Reed elected to replace former Mayor Todd Strange, who, after a decade of service, did not seek re-election. During his campaign, Reed spoke of increasing Montgomery's police force, increasing support for schools, and bringing in more jobs that offer a livable wage.
Still to come, an important discovery made off the Alabama coast linking a community in Mobile to the slave trade. We'll hear about the findings after more than 150 years and its connection to Mobile's Africatown.
Most people don't realize that Mobile is the resting place for the last slave ship to make it to America's shores.
Yeah, a man from Fairhope found it in the Mobile River. It confirms the roots of a lot of the folks who live in the city's Africatown community.
Bria Douglas went there and shares the unique story of how the Clotilda was found and the dream it holds for many in Mobile.
Joycelyn Davis is a direct descendant of Charlie Lewis, one of dozens of slaves forced on the Clotilda, which sailed from Africa to Mobile in the 1800s. It's a family history Davis hasn't always embraced.
Just being young and naive and not, being shameful. As I became older and wiser, I had to look at the story in my own way. I had to build that pride up.
It was hard for Davis knowing her relative arrived on the Clotilda in 1859 with 109 other smuggled slaves. A wealthy businessman named Timothy Mayer made a bet he could kidnap people in Africa and bring them to the U.S. as slaves in 2 years' time. He won that bet, and today Davis lives in the community those slaves helped create.
It's amazing because I actually live near the enslavers as well as my ancestors. because we were all together. So I don't live far from Timothy Avenue and Mare Street. So it's just, I'm surrounded in this box with all this history.
In 1860, 32 of the West African slaves started Africatown, a community consisting of a church, school, and cemetery. The most well-known of the group was Cudjoe Lewis, one of the last known survivors of the Atlantic slave trade.
The commemorative headstone for him that was placed here in 2002 to acknowledge everything that he did from 1860 until his demise in 1935.
Eric Finley is a tour guide for Mobile's African American Heritage Tour. He says while the slaves made positive contributions in Mobile, it never felt like home for them.
All they ever wanted to do was to return back to Africa, to their home, and they never had that opportunity. And they stayed here and they made a way out of no way.
It's believed the Mayer family tried to blow the ship up with dynamite to get rid of evidence of their ancestors' participation in the slave trade.
I didn't really know the Clotilda story that well, and this buddy of mine called me up and he's like, you should look for the Clotilda. That's the biggest mystery out there.
Ben Rains is an award-winning environmental journalist from Fairhope, about 20 minutes from Mobile. The fact no one ever discovered the Clotilda intrigued him, so he set out to find it. He thought he'd succeeded at first, but was mistaken.
Which was, as a journalist, a personally devastating thing to have happen. Because I had, the story of the first ship went viral. It was international.
2 months later, in April 2018, he accomplished his quest.
It had all these handmade blacksmith nails coming out of it, and I just turned to the guys on the boat and I said, we just found a ship from the 1850s. And that was the first moment that the Clotilda had seen the light of day in 160 years.
Kamal Siddiqui has taken almost 1,000 dives looking for slave shipwrecks. He helped confirm the discovery of the Clotilda.
It had a centerboard on it, the type of material used to construct the vessel. So everything began to line up, and that's when the reality began to set in that, wow, this is the Clotilda.
Official confirmation came in May of 2019, 13 months after Ben Rains discovered it. He's now writing a book about his discovery, and there are talks of a documentary.
Because a lot of the people in Africatown are very worried that the ship will be taken and put on display somewhere else, like the Smithsonian. The ship belongs to Africatown, and it should stay there.
Joycelyn Davis agrees.
They have enough in Washington. We need it here. I think that it would generate some type of economic growth if those dollars can go back into the neighborhood, because Africatown needs to be revitalized.
Instead of monetary reparations, she'd like the Mayer family to offer something more monumental, like a museum.
Mobile needs this. We need this.
In Mobile, Bria Douglas, WVTM 13.
A spending bill recently passed in Washington includes money for several priorities in Alabama, including $500,000 to excavate the Clotilda. That money will go towards education and community engagement surrounding the vessel.
From jazz to classical and everything in between, the history of music in Alabama knows no bounds.
Mary O'Connell shares the sweet sounds of the past and into the future.
Dr. Henry Panion knew from a young age his life was meant to be in music.
I would go outside and play street ball with my buddies. Then I'd sneak in the house and watch Sound of Music with my sister. Wouldn't tell my buddies I was doing that.
That love for music evolved into a storied career as a conductor, composer, arranger, and producer, working with artists like Aretha Franklin and...
Being on at Royal Albert Hall in London, conducting the Royal Philharmonic with them in front of me and Stevie Wonder behind me, that was pretty cool.
In September, Panion was inducted into the Alabama Arts Hall of Fame for his contributions throughout his career. One of 4 honored this year through the Alabama Center for the Arts in Decatur.
To be honored by, people while you're still alive, that's pretty exciting.
From one great to another from the past who helped pave the way.
When you think of jazz, you think of Erskine Hawkins.
A jazz legend born right here in Birmingham, Erskine Hawkins. Hawkins composed the song Tuxedo Junction, named for an area in Ensley, once a hub for Birmingham's African American community.
It put Birmingham on the map the world over.
Magnolia Cook is the chairperson for Function in the Junction, a free event highlighting music in the community for more than 3 decades. She and committee member Fan Bailey hope the festival, held in Erskine Hawkins Park, helps keep that music history alive.
It brings the family together and people that haven't seen each other for years.
We wanted to let everybody know that Birmingham has talent. And not only the Temptations and Eddie Kendricks and the Inslee Jubilees.
Each year, the Function in the Junction Committee gives scholarships to local high school students with an interest in music who are going off to college, hoping to inspire the next generation of musicians.
Who knows? From those scholarships, we may have another Erskine Hawkins.
Or a Dr. Henry Panion, who's now the director of UAB's Music Technology Program, helping shape careers of young artists, once like himself. He wants budding artists to remember,
if you have something to offer, that there is a place for you.
There could be a spot in history for you, too. In Birmingham, Mary O'Connell, WVTM 13.
Still to come, marching to their own beat.
We look at the powerful impact HBCU bands have on members and how that translates onto the field.
Miss World, Miss Universe, Miss Teen USA, Miss USA, and Miss America made history in 2019 as for the first time ever, all 5 of the major beauty pageant titles were won by African American women. In addition to adding more of the contestants' lives and community involvement into the judging, together their wins show the competitions have evolved from typically only validating a single standard for beauty and was a big step forward in the historic underrepresentation of African American women within the pageant system. Tiara Pennington made history in our state by becoming the first African American to be crowned Miss University of Alabama. Tiara went on to be crowned as the second Black Miss Alabama in history and represented the state well in the Miss America competition, placing within the top 7.
Historically Black college and university bands have been around for decades.
Their performances are like no other.
But as Xavier Harris found out, for band members, it's more than just taking the field and performing. It's also about building relationships and learning life lessons.
The marching style of HBCU bands. It's a combination of hip, up-to-date dances to more upbeat music.
It was a little bit more precision. It was a little bit more hard.
The unique style dates back to the mid-1940s.
The bands have evolved over the years from the military. If you would look at some old tapes of the Army bands, you will see that they were high-stepping bands until they went to a glide step,
which is a style formerly known as corps style.
They don't do a lot of the movement besides marching, and their whole style of marching is what I call, they have what we call heel-toe. With us, we got toed in the heel.
Florida A&M's first band director, Van Wheeler, is credited for making the change to the football halftime performance that's still being used today and drawing crowds.
Seeing a HBCU band mainly with mainly Black people in it, and to see what talent they have and it's shown on the field, it's just simply mind-blowing.
Alabama State University band director James Oliver says for his students, being in an HBCU band is life-changing.
Talking to students is, you know, they'll say, Dr. Oliver, if it wasn't for band, I wouldn't be a student.
Students say being a part of the band is like a family.
It's more than just what you see out there on the field. We call each other, we tutor each other.
A sisterhood and brotherhood of different people of the same race connecting to celebrate a unique culture.
When you walk the campus, you can feel just how proud everyone is to be Black.
For many, the band's halftime show is the #1 reason they show up to games.
We're like the main attraction, the whole game, the field show, and after the game.
We can see the crowd, they don't leave.
But one of the largest HBCU football games in the country is right here in our very own backyards, the Magic City Classic. The annual game between Alabama A&M University and Alabama State University, the 2 largest HBCUs in the state.
When we pull up to the stadium, you can already feel the energy in the air.
But it's more than just fan love for students. They say being a part of an HBCU band also teaches them life lessons.
It benefits me mainly with my work ethics.
Dr. Oliver has been a band director for more than 40 years and says the most rewarding part of it is not making students better musicians, but providing them with opportunities.
To be a part of some functions, a part of some events that maybe they never would have had an opportunity.
With every note played, step taken, and move made on the field, HBCU marching bands take a unique place in America's music and performance history. The band has become a vital part of HBCU pride and representation. In Birmingham, Xavier Harris, WVTM 13.
Just like those bands, all the civil rights pioneers and the unsung heroes have marched and paved the way for others to gain equality.
The fight continues from inside our schools all the way to the ballot box.
If you'd like to see any of these stories again, visit our website. And on behalf of all of us at WVTM 13, thank you for watching.